Welcome back to the It's Bigger Than Me podcast. I am very excited for our guest, Ray Young, today. When I met this guy, we met at a Facebook group. I reached out and said, hey, I'm looking for some amazing guests on my podcast. And I got a lot of responses, Ray being one of those. We jump on a call and we could just literally talk for hours. Not that we did, but there were so many just connection points and what God is doing. And he always talks about like, let's talk about leadership and impact. And I'm like, gosh, we could be on here literally for hours, right? If we talked about all of that. But today we're actually going to really be diving into the topic of stewardship and multiplying what's in your hands. And so I'm very excited to introduce Ray to you. So Ray, before we jump into today's topic, welcome to the show. And please tell the listeners a little bit more about you.
Hey, Molly, thanks so much for the invitation. I've been really excited about doing this. And just like you, it was immediate, just alignment and spirit. So I'm excited to do that. And then also to share with, the people who will watch and listen to this podcast. I'm an executive leadership coach, motivational, or maybe more educational speaker, and then coach people on that, do some business consulting and training. I'm a real estate investor. I run some businesses. I think the problem I figured out is I don't do very well when I'm bored. And so I just choose to never be bored. A lot of different things, but that really even transitions into our topic for today. I know you've been doing a series on stewardship, and it's one of the things that's really been helpful for me and even a growing process because, like I'll read Philippians chapter 4, and Paul will say, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every circumstance. And reflecting on that, I go, Ray, are you content? Because I'm pretty driven. And yet at the same time, I'm really satisfied. I recognize how blessed I am. And, the Lord's been way better to me than I deserve. And so thinking about those things and then listening to Jesus, it really hit me. And so for me, when I think about stewardship, I think about management, I think about contentment and still being driven. For me, the image that I have is of an open hand, and I want to have an open hand to the Lord, and anything he wants to put in my hands, I want to receive. And it's literally, and that was part of Paul's. He wasn't just grateful for the blessings. He goes through a lot of difficult stuff that he says, I want to be like him and suffer like Jesus. And I want to be conformed to his death. And honestly, I go, there may be a limit there. I'm not sure about all of that. But this idea of if God puts it in my hand, as long as it's in my hand, I'm responsible to steward it or to manage it. And from the parable that Jesus gives about all those different talents, when he puts it in there and he gives to each, I love this part, each according to his ability. And for me, I hear a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome today. And, I feel like I'm acting some other way. Well, the truth is, I believe if God gave you that opportunity, if he gave you that resource, then he's saying, I believe in you. And what a great lesson. It's one I share with my daughters all the time and tons of other people is if you believed in you half as much as I believe in you, you'd probably believe in yourself twice as much as you do, because all of us have that kind of limiting thing. We push ourselves down. We know our struggles, we know our failures, but if God places it in our hands, he's saying, I gave you just exactly what I know you can handle. It may stretch you. You may not feel like you can handle it, but if he puts it in my hand, then I feel like I'm responsible to do the most I can with it. And for him, he says, hey, you got 5 talents? That guy went and made 5 more. The one who got 2 talents went and made 2 more. And the one who got 1 talent says, I don't think I'm going to risk it. And man, that one really speaks to me, challenges me. It's part of what keeps me driven is to say, I don't ever want to be the person who takes what God gives me and says, I'm just going to hold this. I'm going to dig a hole and bury it. I'm going to keep it to myself. And so that drive says, man, if it's in my hand, as long as it's in my hand, he's placed it there, then I want to do the absolute very best I can. I want to honor him. And I want, as long as it's there, I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use it well. Remember, the whole time it's his. And if he wants to take it out of my hand, it was his the whole time anyway. So while it's here, I'm going to use it. And that's been the view that's helped me make sure I'm in alignment with him, but then also keep the drive in check. Because sometimes I do like, oh, this is mine, and I'll close my fist, and it becomes all about me, and I don't want to live that way. So that's kind of the guidelines, the guardrails, if you will, to say, hey, I want to be very content and receive this. I don't know if I said anything, but I'm on the John Maxwell Leadership team, and I've been speaking and coaching for 35, almost 36 years now. And one of the things that's made me uncomfortable is people come up and say, "Oh, that was great," or "You're great." And I always felt like, And then one of the things he told me, this is like 5.5 years ago, he said, "Ray, when someone does that, they're praising the giver, not the gifted. It's not you. You didn't originate it. And so, again, it's in my hand, but I didn't put it there. I didn't create it. He did." It's one of the things that Paul says in his letter to the church at Corinth. He says, "What do you have that you didn't receive? And if you did receive it, why do you act like you didn't?" And so when I stop and think about it, I go, well, I don't even have life if God didn't give it. I don't have any abilities, any resources. I don't have anything. He gave it all. So as long as he's given it, then I feel like I'm responsible to do the very best I can with it. And that's really helped me.
Gosh, there's so many good things in there. I love it. And one of the first things, it was a question that popped up for me as you were talking, because we can all tell by what he just shared, there's a lot of experience behind that. Is there a lesson that you had in stewardship that really got you to shift your paradigm or perspective in any area? Because when it comes to stewarding, the series that he's referring to is I went live every single day in September talking on different aspects of stewardship, because typically people think it's just money, but it's everything that we get to steward. So I'm curious, what area of stewardship kind of maybe rocked you the most or stands out to you that you can share with us, just to give the folks at home a little perspective?
Thanks. That's a great question. And really, there are two events. I don't know if you think about it this way. I can look back in my life and see places where there was a massive mindset change, or there was massive growth, or like the light bulb came on. I'm like, how did I live in the darkness so long? So there were two things. One of them, I've only got a few things I'm very good at, and then there's a long list of things that I'm not. And so evaluating one year, I thought, man, I really need to get better at this and this. And it was literally 6 things. And so I was working super hard on those, New Year's resolutions, but I was sticking with it. I made it past Valentine's Day when most of those things end. And about halfway through March, I was talking to my wife and I said, I'm just exhausted. I am doing this. And I just went through my list and I'm being intentional here, and I'm blocking time here, and I'm doing all of that. And she said, yeah, but what about us? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, what about the girls and I? You're working really hard on all these things. And the other caveat there was, I said, I don't feel like I'm doing very good on these. And then the things that I have been really good at, I don't think I'm doing well there. But she challenged me and said, you're doing all that other stuff, but you're not taking time for you and I, and time for the girls. And it hit me. I mean, it probably would have been less of a hit if she just would have doubled up her fist and punched me in the face. And I really just stopped, because I've known people who've sacrificed. And I think it's a real temptation that people who've sacrificed the most important things, their faith, their family, their finances, their health, sacrifice some really important things because they're chasing finances, or they're chasing career, they're chasing a promotion. And so she hit me with that, and I went, wait a second. I made a commitment. I'm not going to be that way. And then here I am, and I'm doing it. And so I really, really went back and said, what is it you're good at? And this was a huge change for me, is I thought, and I still think, I could do just about anything, but I shouldn't. I think God wires us in a way, especially if you think about Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12, the body has all kinds of parts, and every part's not the same. We're different in a lot of ways, and that's by the design of God. He makes us differently. And so before that, my thought was, well, I've just got to do all of it. If we're all alike, and I'll be really good. And if I'm weak, and that's what I was doing, if I'm weak in an area, then I'm really going to push hard. I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to make myself better. And then reflecting on that, I went, wait a second. God's given me specific gifts. He's given me abilities and talents. I need to know what those are. And so I think I was arrogant then. This is 2003. And so I went to a leadership team, and I said, look, guys, I think I'm good at 5 things. And I went through them, and I said, as the leader of this company, you may think you need something else. And so here's my letter of resignation. You need a more well-rounded leader, somebody more capable. But if you want me to stay, I'm only going to do these 5 things because they're my strengths. And shockingly, they gave my letter of resignation back and said, no, we'll do that. And I said, okay, the rest of that is, then you've got to have that giftedness. You've got to step up and cover these things because they're important. So that was a huge one. And then several years later, I went into business for myself. And I actually had 4 businesses going at once. And I was literally getting up, going to work about 6 o'clock in the morning, leaving at like 11 o'clock at night. And even when I'm at home, I'm like just thinking about it the whole time. And so I'm a slow learner. And when I learn, it doesn't stick very well. But really had a conversation with God then and said, look, if that's what it takes for me to be in business for myself, I don't need to be in business for myself. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set some boundaries, and it's going to be reasonable, and they're going to be this time. And so I'm going to put it in your hands. I'm going to do this. I'm going to honor you first because I'd taken him out of first place and said, I'm going to do this. And if you want to bless this business and make it work that way, fine. And if not, I don't need this business. Now, the rest of that was I'd risked everything. It's all on the line. But it was really that gut check that said, either God's blessing it, his favor's on it, you're walking in step with him, or you're not. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not, as painful as that would be, and, not amazingly, it did so much better afterwards. Just going, I'll do this. And so it's like, okay, you put these businesses in, and when I close my fist and I've got to run it and I've got to control it, and it just depends on me, it doesn't work very well. In fact, that was my in my morning readings, I always look for one thing just to carry with me. And so I'm in Zechariah, and Zechariah 4. I knew it, but it just keeps echoing in my heart and mind today. He says, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. Mm-hmm. And it's just been a great reminder for me to go, wait a second, do you really want to do it on your own? Do you want to depend on yourself?
Right.
And sometimes I go, yeah, but the truth is, no, I don't want to do that. Right. And so those have been the two big, basically the same lesson twice, but in different settings. Once for others, and then once, hey, I'm the top dog. This is on me. But it's the same thing to say, hey, you've placed it here, so I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to work in my strength zone. And I think strength zone, we talk about, go ahead, sorry.
I love it. I mean, yeah, you are just full of wisdom here, Ray. I love just being able to hear you talk. But I think, super quick, I think just the marriage piece is so huge. I mean, a lot of us get into our own business. Why? Because we want to have freedom, whether it's personally, financially, with our family takes a hit. Our family gets the worst of us. Like, they just take all the bumps and bruises along the way. And it's such a hard lesson because you're just like, well, how am I supposed to do both? But it's like, okay, Lord, like, what is that supposed to look like? So it's just continually inviting him in when the world's like, I'm going to do it. Self-made. I got this. I have these gifts. It's all I, rather than we. Like, Lord, what are we going to do together so you can lead me? Because I don't want to, like you said, like scripture all day long, we'll talk about like, don't do this on your own, not on your own strength. Paul talks about boasting in his weaknesses. And I remember reading that like back in the day when I first started getting into my own business. And I was like, weaknesses, what are you talking about? Because I had so much pride and so much ego that I was like, yeah, no, I'm pretty much good at a lot of things. So, and the Lord's like, okay, when you're ready to give that to me, then we'll figure it out. And jokingly, I tell people I have prosthetic legs at this point because I've been cut at the knees so many times to humble me that it's just, I mean, that's all that I have left. I mean, there's nothing left because it took so many lessons. So to your point, similar lesson, different areas, but all that like, hey, Ray, I'm trying to get a hold of you in this area so you can learn this because there's so much more freedom on the other side of it. Because running your own businesses, it is hard. It's not for the faint of heart. It is a lot of work, and a lot of people are like, oh, must be nice. And it's like, well, if you only knew the sacrifices and the surrendering and all the things that it took, but it's such a beautiful lesson in just really submitting to the Lord, having him lead you, and then being able to create what he wants to create through you. So that's really powerful, especially on the marriage front. I love that you led with that because a lot of people, their relationships, it's everything. And then that takes a back seat once you check it off the list. I have it. Well, you have to nurture it, right? Like it's like a garden. Like you got to make sure the weeds are out of there and it's watered and sunlight. And if you don't do that, then the weeds are going to choke it out. And hopefully you hope it survives.
Right. Yeah. And I think we do a lot of times, business owners, we get in and think, well, I'm going to have time freedom and money freedom and all these things. But what we actually do is those things become the slave master over us. And that's part of what's behind I told you that I'd written a book, and it's called Run Your Life, and they're literally lessons that changed me from running, but they apply to everyone. And it is to go, wait a second. So often we feel like life's running us, or my business is running me, and we get it out, and it's like, step back and go, wait a second. Is that the way it's supposed to be? Is that the way I want it to be? And we feel like sometimes, well, I can't change it. It's just that's the way it is. And you look around, and that's really where I do most of my executive coaching, is with people who got great businesses from an outward, super successful, but they're going, wait a second. I didn't want to pay this price, and I don't want this business to run my life. And that's part of it, is to go, it doesn't have to. You can change that up. And that's that lesson for me when I'm running my own business, is going, hey, this thing's in control, and I didn't sign up for that. I mean, Pharaoh was a long time ago, and I'm not going to Egypt, so I don't need a slave master anymore.
Right.
So yeah, that was a huge one. And I was thinking a little bit, and I started about the strengths. And I think sometimes we think about strengths and talk about them maybe in an inaccurate way. I believe that just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's a strength. And for instance, I went to college and I started as an accounting major, but I figured out pretty quickly I'm good with numbers. I've always been good with numbers, but I need to get out and interact and talk to people. And so I've got several businesses that I run, several businesses that I own, but I don't do any of the accounting. I want to read the report because I would rather drive my head, just run it through a brick wall. And so I'm good at it, but strengths, you're good at it and it gives you strength. And so, like last night, I got to speak to a group of college students, and I started my day early and went for a run. And man, I was completely exhausted physically, but inside, I mean, I got home and I was talking to my wife, and then she's finally like, "Okay, I'm going to go to sleep." Or I said, "It's going to take me a while," because I just inside had given me so much strength, and it just the fire inside. And I think that's the strength. It's one of the ways to say, because a lot of people aren't aware of what are my strengths? What are those things God's placed in my hand that I really need to make the most of?
Mm.
And so, try a lot of things, and the stuff that's like, I'm pretty good at it. And I don't go, oh, I mean, I got
Yeah.
it done, but that was terrible. But hey, that was great. I can't wait to do that again. That's in the strength zone. And as I don't know what it's like in California or wherever anybody else is listening, but I look around and I see a lot of people doing well at a lot of things, but they're just exhausted. And it's like
Yes.
beating it out of them. And that's not what the Lord intended for us either. And so
Totally.
we're cheating ourselves by
Yes.
doing all those things.
In California, like there's a lot of people that are working multiple jobs just to survive. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just crazy. And that's why, a lot of people move out, or you see a lot of families live together. It's just the rent is insane. Anytime somebody's like, how much rent are you paying? Or what are you paying over there? And I'm just like, don't ask, because you don't want to know. And, just let it be. Right.
Right.
Like I live in a place people vacation. So I maximize where I live. And plus,
Mm-hmm.
no, anyways, you're supposed to be here. A couple of things that you said that's so funny is I totally resonate with physically you're tired, because I get up and I go to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning. So physically, like I'm exhausted, but mentally stimulated. Mentally, I had my first battle of the day. I was able to push through. It was
Yeah.
funny because I just came back from a work trip, and there was part of this event that we were at. They had a prophetic worship night. And so I'm like, oh, sign me up. And then somebody says it starts at 9 p.m. I go to bed at like 8. Like when the sun goes down, I'm in bed, and I was like, 9 p.m. So here are things that I know. 2 things will keep me up past my bedtime, quote unquote. Being around a fire pit with good conversation and a good worship night. Tell me
Uh-huh.
why that night did not end till after, we didn't get back till after midnight. And by the time it finished, we got in the car at like 11:45. I was like buzzing on a second wind, and I got up that morning at 4:30, and I was like, I don't know how, but I do, because there's very few things that get me energetically moving like I am
Mhm.
on a second wind. And people are like, I've never seen you like this. And I'm like, well, like when things give you life, it
Exactly.
will just like, it doesn't matter what your body feels like, your mind, your spirit will carry it through. And your body kind of goes on autopilot at that point, because it knows like, all right,
Yeah.
we're doing the thing and we'll figure it out later. So yeah, things that give us life, it's so important. And you have to know. And I love the way you described, like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's a strength. I thought that was a very, very like important lesson for people to hear,
Mm.
because often it just gets misconstrued. So it's
Right.
really ask the question, like, okay, Lord, like, well, then what are my strengths? What do you see my strengths being? So I can align
Hmm.
with that. So then you're being effective and efficient with where you're putting your time and energy.
Yeah, for sure. I like to think about it in three ways. There are things that no matter where you are, what role you're in, whether it's, you're as a spouse, as a parent, as a child, especially, my mom is aging. She's in pretty good health, but there's some things there. And then as a business owner and then running a business for other people, wherever you are, there are some things that are just required and you don't necessarily love them. With anything you do, there's going to be something that you're just like, oh, I hate this. I don't want to do this, but
Yeah.
it's required. And it's primarily like, this is the role. I'm responsible for this. But then there are also things that bring results. And this is that Pareto principle. It's become really famous, but I don't feel like enough people really drill down that 80% of your results come from 20% of what you do, and 20% of your results come from 80% of what you do. And I mean, I talk about that a lot with people in groups and one-on-one, and they're like, oh, yeah, 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 we know it. And then I ask the question, like, okay, what about this 80%? Have you quit doing? Well, none of it. I mean, I've got to do it. And so I know it, but I don't do it.
Right.
And so it's to focus on what brings the result, what really moves the needle. And then the third one is what gives me a reward. And so when you were talking about yours, mine was exactly the same. We're talking after I'd given my presentation, and people are both, I'm like, and I looked down and went, oh man, it's 20 minutes after my bedtime. They're like, Ray, it's 8:50. I said, I know. I go to bed at 8:30 because I got up at 3:50. And they're like, how do you do that? I can't go to sleep this early. And I said, hey, if you'll go 5 days in a row at getting up at 3:50, I promise you can go to bed at 8:30. I've never thought about that, but it is part of that deal. But you just get into it and you're like, this is it. This is what I was wired by God for. And that's the best place in the world to be,
I
is to
love that.
be in your calling. And so I love that thought,
Yeah,
and
that's so
looking at it that way.
powerful. I love talking to another morning person too, because people are like, I don't get it. And it's like, yes, if you woke up as early as I did, and not only like try to not getting up begrudgingly, like, oh, I have to, it's
Yeah.
I get to because of the way I get to pour into myself before anybody else gets a part of me.
Hmm.
Yes, go to bed early too, because really, like after it gets dark, there's really nothing good out there. Like, just move on. Like, I'd rather it be
Yeah.
dark and early than dark and late because there's just it's just a very different feel. But Ray, this has been
Yeah.
so good. My gosh. I mean, the amount of wisdom and nuggets, like I feel like there's going to be like smoke coming off of people's pencils and pens as they're like writing notes. Before we wrap up today, is there anything else you'd love to leave us with? And then ways that people can find and connect with you?
I think it's also maybe one of the biggest changes for me has been, primarily in whatever the venue, whether we're talking about in churches, business, schools. We've kind of had this pyramid where the person at the top, the leaders at the top, and everybody's there to serve them. And especially people, kingdom minded people, it's like, wait a second, that's exactly the opposite of what Jesus said. And so when we turn that pyramid upside down and we see ourselves as support, as there to serve everyone else, it also lets some of that off, because you go some of that pressure off and you say, wait a second, my role here is to love you, to support you, to care for you, to take care of you. And when you think about it that way, when the people that we work with are doing well, they in every area, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, in their career, in their finances, in their relationships outside of that, when they're doing well there, I mean, the quality of life goes up. And when your quality of life goes up, everything else does too. And even kingdom people, we forget that sometimes. And it's like we want to go to the top and we want to be the one who's getting to tell everybody else what to do and how to do it and when to do it and hold them accountable, instead of saying, hey, God's gifted you too. And really believing that God's put people, he brings us together. And when we recognize that, then we're able to love them and serve them and want what's best for them. And so I think it's and I think it is. I think that's gaining traction, but I can't wait for it to get even more traction throughout the world of saying, hey, we're here, and what do you know? The Lord's way is better than our way. I really have enjoyed this so much, and I hope that it's been a blessing to a lot of people. I
Definitely.
hate to self promote, but I do. It's really short, and somebody said, "Hey, it's not perfect. It's got grammatical errors," and I'm like, you know what? I'm not perfect. It's not perfect. By the way, you're not perfect. But if you can get rid of some of those things, and we're going to the third edit right now, try to get better. But it is, and I believe this is. It's not me, but I believe God's done some things, and He's taught me some things and given me some experiences. You're talking about getting up early. One of the things I love the best about getting up early and going to exercise is I've had some time with the Lord, and then I have some time while I'm doing that, but I got to win because a lot of mornings I don't want to get out of bed. And then I do something physically challenging, and it's like, that's a win. And when you start with wins, you keep going. And that's one of the things I love the best about the book is that it just lays that trajectory out there and says, hey, here's some small things. It's really fast. It's pretty simple, but it really makes a difference. And then, I'm on all the stuff, Facebook, I think it's Ray Young 2, or Ray Young .2. My Instagram is the number 4 Ray 2. And then, my website's rayyoungspeaker.com. But I'd love to connect with people and serve. And maybe it'd be good for them. And I really believe that some of the people that are watching and listening to this, that they can add some benefit to me and blessing to my life as well. So I want to thank you again for being a great host and for the opportunity to share with your audience.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been the treat is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. This has been amazing. So, yes, definitely connect with all the ways that you can connect with Ray on his website, check out his book, all the good things. But, Ray, thank you so much for your time today and just blessing us with all this wisdom with stewardship. And yeah, there's just so many good nuggets in here. I appreciate you coming on.
It's been great. I've really loved it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. It means the world to me that you would lean in, listen in, and be able to hear the value that's being shared on this show. Don't forget, if you love this episode, rate the show, leave me a review, be sure to share it with a friend, and don't forget to tag me on social media. I will definitely be giving you a shout out. Also, come say hi, drop in the DMs. I would love to be able to hear what stood out to you the most on the episode, and if there's any topics that you would like to hear on the show. We'll see you next time.